Very good evening. I think all are excited about today's session. Especially, I am really excited, Ratnakar, because it's been since January or before that the whole world changed the way that they think and they do things because of OpenAI's ChatGPT became so democratized everything that we do. And things have absolutely kind of disrupted or turned upside down or we become more effective, efficient with with such simple application which has changed the way that we look at. And personally, I have been using ChatGPT for everything I do, and that has made my life more easier and more efficient. So today I'm sure all of you are excited about this. And this is not just a webinar that we bring to you. This is going to be a workshop on building a quick chatbot with using the power of the large language models which are available to you. But before we introduce our dear mentor Ratnakar Pandey, let me take a minute to introduce ourselves. Those who know us or those who don't know us, please look up Nikesh. Nikesh, if you can share our website link in the chat, that would be good. So we are REVA Academy for Corporate Excellence, which is an initiative of REVA University. We are in North Bangalore, India. I know some of you are joining from outside as well. So we do a series of programs for uh, anyone who is interested and continue learning. So it's not for students, for even a person who is retired must be learning. So we are here to excite you more on continuing education, and we do a series of programs around emerging technologies, AI, data science being one of our prominent area. And Ratnakar Pandey has been our dear mentor for almost 6 to 7 years now, has been working very closely in designing and delivering programs for us when we design programs in data science and AI. So he is very well versed with anything around machine learning, deep learning. But now I understand that everyone has been sharpening their acts with anything around large language models, and RP is not an exception. So we thought that RP being is a unique style of already democratizing ML for us, I think he is the right person to give us a good understanding plus some hands-on skills on large language models. RP comes with more than more than say 15, 16, or maybe 2 decades. I don't want to. Yeah, so 2 decades of experience on running and implementing AI data science solutions. He originally has a lot of banking expertise, but I think now he's a kind of a domain agnostic experts, can set up center of excellence in data science. He has done that in Amazon, Cabbage. He's now kind of taken more of a consulting role in a company called NuWare. But he's just not limited himself to one profile. He has been a great mentor, great teacher for all of us. And please follow RP. I'm sure you are following already. His nuggets of wisdom on LinkedIn has been amazing. He actually sifts through thousands of materials and give us very simple to use, easy to use nuggets, which makes all of our life easy. So looking forward to a great session, RP, and hope that everyone will start making use of large language models and actually building a chatbot for themselves after this session. Thank you. Over to you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Shinu, for a great introduction. Happy to be here, folks, and equally happy that all of you took the time out on a Friday evening to be here with us. So, without any further ado, let me just begin sharing my screen, and if you could confirm whether you can see it.
Yes, we can see
all good.
Thank you, slide.
Okay. So I'll just move back to the original one. So we'll begin with the topic of the day today, and I will try to scribble something on my writing pad. I mean, this will be handy a little bit later in the discussion. So if you could confirm whether you can see this also. All good?
Yes, we can.
Okay, okay, awesome. Great. So let's begin with the topic for the day today. And it's a combination of two things, right? What are the two things that we're going to talk about? We will talk about the LLMs, which are nothing but your large language models. And we'll talk about the chatbots, right? So chatbots are something which are not new for any one of us. I mean, I bet, I mean, pretty much everybody who is present over here would have interacted with the chatbots in some shape and form. But what really changes is the power of the chatbots, right? And how LLMs really take them to the next orbit, right? Or I mean, multiple orbits higher than what they have been doing as of now. So I will do a very, very tiny bit of demonstration using both LLMs and chatbots for you. Um, and we'll be leveraging something which is completely open source. So none of you need to pay for anything or buy anything. I'm a big subscriber to open source and the free stuff as much as possible. So that's what my mental model is, and hopefully that will help you in terms of setting up something on your own right after this webinar today. Okay. So I think you have already heard a little bit about myself from Dr. Shinu. So I've been, in the industry for almost 20 years now, maybe even more than that, with multiple companies, multiple roles. Um, Worked hands-on in the beginning of my career, became a people leader, still continue to work hands-on. And in the most recent role, again, I'm back to the being analyst, right? So I am not managing a team. I'm just independently advising and consulting one of my clients in some LLM's execution for a particular client of theirs. So, what is a chatbot, right? So, this is anything which is AI-powered software that can engage human in the text or voice conversation, right? Um, you go to any site, for example, let's say you've ordered something from Amazon, and if you have any questions about any of your product or delivery related things and so on and so forth, the first thing that you do is you will talk to a chatbot or voice bot, right? So depending on whether you're calling them on the phone or whether you are actually pinging them on the chat, this is what you really talk to first, right? Now, why is it that the companies have the chatbots and the voice bots? For a variety of different reasons, right? So, I mean, we'll talk about that. But one of the most important reasons from the customer backwards mental model is that it's available 24/7. I mean, I really cannot build any company where I can guarantee that the moment the customer logs in, let's say 3:30 a.m. in the morning, right? I have somebody to talk to the customer right away. So you don't have any waiting time, you don't have any timeout periods, you don't have any of those blackouts, which typically, are the pain points in a customer-heavy organization, in a sales or the customer calling-heavy organization, right? So chatbots and the voice bots definitely help you there, right? So in fact, I mean, just to talk about my personal experience and how things have really the things around us have changed so fast. So I called Indigo, right, and I called AirAsia for travel booking, and the first thing that I get to hear is a voice bot talking to me. And it's not a static voice bot where you say press one and IVR menu. Those are not the ones that I'm talking about. Those have been there for decades, right? This is actually a conversational bot where you can say, I'm calling to make a travel booking, or I'm calling about my reservation. I want to change the ticket, right? And it will process your voice and it will come back and say, do you mean that you want to change your ticket that you have booked for such and such date? You say yes or no. And then again, it will take, like multiple seconds, maybe 2, 3 seconds. And then it will come back and say, this is what we have for you and so on and so forth, right? So that's basically the power of the bots, right? And in my view, we are just about starting in the journey, right? So even though the chatbots and voice bots have been existing for multiple years or maybe decades now, the revolution that is coming in because of the LLM is, taking them to the very next level that nobody imagined the level of efficiency and the human-like performance they will be doing, right? So that's the crux of the discussion today that we'll be focusing on. They help you in terms of automating the responses, FAQs, provide assistance in many, many different industries, right? Multiple examples exist all around us as well. Customer service chatbot, virtual assistants. Your chat GPT is nothing but a chatbot itself, right? So that's the irony of that. Will be leveraging some of those tools which are actually all around us, but we don't really realize that they are actually nothing but a chatbot, right? Um, The benefits, as we have mentioned already, the biggest benefit in my view is this, which is the 24/7 availability, right? So there's no downtime. There's no time period which your customer cannot reach you and get, at least uh, some of their basic queries and questions answered. So that's the biggest benefit, I believe, the chatbots and the voice bots bring. We will focus more on the chatbots in today's discussion, but whatever I'm talking about for the chatbot is applicable for a voice bot as well. So you can just extend the same thought process there. They are scalable. And I can talk about one example. So one of the things we were struggling with in Amazon is the customer service quality team. So you have a team of customer service associates who would attend to the customer's call related to their product, related to any other general questions. I mean, Amazon Prime membership, right? What benefits they get, right? What happened to the return and refund, so on and so forth, right? And then there is a team of QAs which will monitor the performance of these CSAs to really see how well they are doing, whether they are following the protocols or not, right? So let's imagine that Amazon is doing X billion dollars of business in India right now, and there's a team of, I'm just making up number. Don't go take it literally. There's a team of, let's say, 2,000 customer service associates. Now, if Amazon does 10x of the business that they're doing in India as of now, does it mean that now I have to have 10,000 CSAs? No, right? Because that's not a really tech heavy and scalable business model, because you just cannot really hire that many number of people. And then imagine if I have 10,000 CSAs, how many quality people I need to hire to really monitor the conversation, and can I really monitor all their conversations? So scalability becomes a big challenge for the organizations as they grow. And that's where the bots really come in, and they provide you a scalable, cost effective solution with the service level agreements that you have in terms of the customer's expectation, and also, enhancing the customer experience. You can type your questions at any point of time in the chat window. And what I will do is, I mean, after I finish the deck, before I go to the code, I will answer some of your questions. And then I will walk you through the code hands on in terms of what we are doing, right? Here is an example of a chatbot in many different industries over here. So I'll give you maybe 10 seconds to take a look at it, and then I can talk about some of the main takeaways from the slide. And I'm sure some of you would have already seen some of these things happening around you. Okay, so I think customer support, everybody would know that, yeah, the chatbots have been there and they will actually help you in terms of is your query about this and so on and so forth. And some of those are static. So some of them will say, choose one if you're talking about this, choose two if you're talking about this. Then when you choose one, then again they'll say choose one if you're talking about this, and three, and so on and so forth, right? So those are what we call as a decision tree based or logic based, basically, in terms of you have or rule based. You have created certain rules and they follow those rules to do that, right? There are chatbots which are conversational. You can say, hi, how can I help you, right? And you type the query and then they are actually able to converse with you. So those are the chatbots that we're looking at in terms of doing that, right? I will do very, very small demo. It's not going to be like, having any memory and all of those things. And don't worry about any of the terms that I'm using. So we'll talk about that when we get into the thick of the execution in the code. But they don't have any memory, the code that I'm going to show you today. But we can actually have those, like power for them to remember you and all of that. So some of those are there in some of these customer service bots. They remember when you sign in that, hey, RP, welcome back, and so on and so forth. But in our demo today, none of those things will be existing. This is a very, very hot area where a lot of people are trying to get deeper into using the bots. Can I really do the product recommendation? Ultimately, a business is all about selling. If you can do the selling in an automated fashion, in a customer relevant fashion, nothing like it, right? So product recommendations and how can I really make sure that I recommend the right product to the customer is a super hot area, particularly given the LLM revolution right now. And then again, you have, order tracking, all the other pieces that come to it, right? Some of you, if you have used any medical or healthcare APIs in the apps, you will see that this is, something that you will routinely see. So even before you talk to a doctor, they will say, "Hey, I'm Isa or I'm Lisa," or some fancy name they create for the bots, right? And they'll say, "How old are you? What like health conditions you have. Are you on any medication? When was your last health checkup? So on and so forth. And that basically helps in terms of the data collection, in terms of the some of the other basic things. I mean, they really don't replace the doctor just yet. That may happen in future, but as of now, I mean, they are actually used in terms of doing some of that more mundane sort of activities, right? Travel, I think, has taken a big leap in my view, based on my limited experience in terms of just dealing with them, where both voice bots and chatbots are much more conversational and they are doing variety of different things, right? Similarly, in the banking and the financial services, you'll see there are a lot of bots applications where, I mean, they can give you personalized suggestions as well. So depending on, your portfolio, depending on what you have traded in the past, they can recommend, these are the things that you should actually do in terms of your investment. They can help you address in terms of your account questions and other sort of inquiries you may have on your portfolio as well, right? So bottom line is, you name any industry, pretty much there is, a bot sitting there handling variety of different tasks, right? And there might be multiple bots for multiple purposes as well. Now, let's move to the main point over here, why bots are becoming more important now. They're becoming more important now because of the LLMs, right? Large language models. So ChatGPT is a large language model, has been trained on billions of parameters, petabytes of data from internet, right? Pretty much everything which exists on internet has been something that ChatGPT has been trained on. Uh, let's see if somebody knows till which time or which cutoff is the time period where, I mean, ChatGPT has the data from, after which time the data does not exist in the ChatGPT. Let's see if you have that answer. Just to bring everybody in the conversation here. Anyone knows? 2021. That's correct. September 2021 is the correct answer over here. So they have been trained anything which existed till September 2021. So you can imagine the amount of data they have been trained on. I agree that, I mean, they don't have the recent data, but anything which existed on the net, whether it's the blogs, articles, Wikipedia, any websites where they can scrape, even YouTube, um, your audio files, everything and anything that existed on internet, they have been trained on, right? So which is a plus and a minus. We'll talk about that more later on. But the whole idea is that they have become so powerful right now that the bot and the behavior of the bots is radically affected because of the LLMs. If you are baking in an LLM in a chatbot, it's having so much more knowledge about what has happened in the past, and it's able to bring in all those knowledge via the process called as transfer learning, right? So whatever they have been trained on, these chat GPT like models, LLMs, they bring in that knowledge when you deploy them on the bot, right? So, for example, let's say I log into a site and say, by the way, I'm just pretending that I'm actually logging into a uh, nutritional website, right? So when I say, I'm, somebody who is trying to cut the calories, so I'm looking for, something which is low calorie, low carb, low in sugar, all of those things, right? It's able to generate a very, very good sort of like, overall profile of myself, because it's aware of the data in the past, what has happened in the past, and, people who have similar sort of, profile, what else is the knowledge that existed. So even though I haven't told it completely in my query, but because of that knowledge it has been trained on, it is able to leverage that knowledge in terms of telling me a better answer. So that's what we have in terms of the large language models. And there are a variety of different models, and I will show you some of them, and you can make a note of this link as well, in terms of which models exist out there. Just a second. I will just remove the keyboard from here. Okay. Ah, I know why. My pen is on the plate, so that's why it's not behaving well. Okay, now I am actually good. So I will show you some of those large language models, and we'll make it. I mean, you can take a look at those later on as well. But at least good for you to be aware of those. In fact, I had that link over here. So you can take a look at these later on whenever you have an opportunity. And they provide you, tons of these LLMs out there. And we'll be grabbing one of those LLMs from the Hugging Face, and I will explain briefly what is Hugging Face when we go to the demo. But the bottom line is that many large language models which exist. Can anyone take a guess how many large language models exist in Hugging Face platform, which I'm going to show? Any guess? I know you may not be aware of what is even Hugging Face and all of those, but just a guess. How many models do you think exist? Let's see the chat window if I have any responses. 200. Okay. Go higher by a multiple actually. Okay, so I think the last count I had, there are around 200 plus, 200,000 plus models which exist on the Hugging Face. These are all LLMs, so I can show you. So if you go to the models, yeah, so the exact number is 240K, 248K models which exist. All of these are, something that you can leverage in your work. Some of them are paid, some of them are free. Most of them are free actually, and that is what we have. And there are a variety of different open source models that you can leverage, which are doing phenomenally well, like a Falcon 40B. You have Llama. You have. I'm just looking at some of the main ones that people are using right now. Llama 13B, Vicuna is one of the big ones, right? People are using that as well. GPT-4, somebody has done the reverse engineering. Most likely, GPT-4 is not available. GPT for all is another model. And when you look into any of these large language models, the parameter that they are actually highlighting over here is this 40B. 40B meaning they have been trained on 40 billion parameters. So the weights of the models are 40 billion parameters that we're looking at, right? This is a 65 billion parameters. This is a 35 billion parameter, right? And so on and so forth. And there's, some syntax that they follow in the naming of the models or some nomenclature that we follow. But the bottom line is they have been trained on billions of parameters, right? And that's what makes them super powerful because they have so much understanding about the data, right? I mean, petabytes of data, that many weights they are actually carrying with that. So they are very, very accurate in terms of what they're talking about. But it doesn't mean they are perfect. They can never be as good as human, in my view, but they are getting close to it. They can understand the, natural language very well. And they have the multimodal flexibility as well. So they can understand the images, the text, the audios, the videos, you name it, right? I mean, pretty much everything can be understood by these models. But a bulk of these models are good at what we call as the natural language processing, which is the text and audio, right? And some of some of the other things like the utterances which might be there in different format and all of that, but mostly the text is what we are comfortable with in terms of deploying the LLMs. Then next one is the audio, right? Where is the what are the use cases of the LLMs? Content creation, right? I mean, how many of us we just go to Chat GPT and say write this, right? I mean, students are actually writing their entire homework using Chat GPT, right? So they're great at the content creation in terms of you give them any piece of information and they will be able to write a nice blog, nice article, marketing campaign, brochure, right? And pretty much everything can be done with them, right? The other thing that they are being used is the virtual assistant, which is what we're going to focus on today, or chatbots, basically, right? You can use them for the research and the knowledge. You can look into extracting the knowledge, the summary, sentiment analysis, like any sort of NLP task that you have been doing by hand or by using any of the packages. Now you can actually get the LLMs to do it for you, right? So some of the NLP tasks, like sentiment analysis, for example, right? So if I pass on a particular paragraph, you would normally deploy some packages in NLP, like Spacey or Vader and some of those packages. You don't need to do that anymore, right? Or I mean, you can still do it, but LLMs can do it for you. So you pass on a paragraph and you can say that please tell me whether this sentiment is positive, neutral, or negative, and you'll get the answer, which is going to be fairly accurate, right? Translation is another big one, and this is something which has been there from very beginning. So Google Translate is nothing but an LLM sitting in the background and doing the translation for you, and fairly accurate in terms of the translation performance, right? Uh, Creative performance, right? I mean, nowadays you can write, in fact, the movie of the script of a movie or a song, or you can write a poem, or you can say, if Shakespeare was alive, how would he talk about this particular topic? And all of that creative things is something that you can do. Images, right? I mean, people have shown Bill Gates and Elon Musk in Indian wedding attires and all of those things. So it's all possible, right? I mean, of course, I mean, we have a flip side as well in terms of the abuse that we'll be talking about, but anything and everything is a fair game for LLMs as of now. um, Shifting gear back to the chatbots, what are the things that we should be looking at when we are working on any of the chatbots, and how we should be structuring that? Some of these main things you should keep in mind. It should be very clear and concise in terms of the languages that they're using, right? So do not use fancy languages and complex things and all of that. I mean, think about you're having a conversation with a 10-year-old kid, right? Or even younger kid. That is the sort of language that you should be using in a bot, because there's a lot of emotional intelligence, body languages, which are not there when you're talking to a bot. So do not use words and sentences which may result in some ambiguity and confusion, or the misinterpretation of the what you're trying to say, right? So use simple languages and all of that. They need to be context aware. This is a really big one, right? So context is something that you'll keep on hearing in pretty much all the LLM discussion. Does anyone know what is a context in natural language or any of the large language models? What is a context? What have you heard? If you've heard anything at all? No? Okay, so I can probably talk about that. Context is nothing but being aware of your situation, right? Uh, Being aware of your data, being aware of your past, being aware of your history in terms of what you have communicated and all of that, being aware of your product portfolio. All of this is something, nothing but your context, right? So when you're actually having a bot, your bot should know, like, who is this customer, how many orders they have purchased in past, what were the challenges they faced in the past. If this customer is calling 5 times in the day today, I should not be asking, how can I help you, right? Or, I mean, can you tell me what your problem statement is? Because that's absolutely rubbish, right? I mean, if I've called 5 times, or if I've already, spoken to a bot 5 times, I mean, that's the context that it should be having, because then you'll be actually having a meaningful conversation. If I have to repeat myself 10 times, then it's not really helping in terms of resolving my situation, right? The other thing is personalization and customization. So, you should be having a conversation with a person. You're not having a conversation with your customer, you're having a conversation with a person. So how we want to customize some of those things, and how we want to make it much more personable in terms of discussion, is what we should be looking at, right? There are a lot of times where a chatbot will be stuck, right? Or not being able to move forward in terms of the customer service or the resolution of the queries and all of that. So those are the instances where you should be able to pass off to a human agent, right? So the bot should say that, if I'm not able to assist you, would you like to talk to a customer service associate in person, right? And that's really a very, very human way of sort of, like, having a conversation. And otherwise, people get paranoid that, am I stuck talking to a bot all the time, or do I have that exit loop where I can actually go and talk to a human, right? Because there are times where that is definitely required. So you should have that sort of interface also, where you can seamlessly transition between a bot and a human, more likely from a bot to a human than the other way around. And you can have that context passed along as well to the human agent to help you in that, right? Continuous learning and improvement, right? So anytime when you are having any bot in the production, so they shouldn't be, static in their learning. So they should know what is working, what is not working, and how you should behave, right? And in fact, I can do a quick demo for you. So when you look into any of these Bard or Chat GPT, right? I mean, in this case, I mean, let's say I don't have that, but let's say if I do 2 plus 2, or, I mean, what is India's capital, right? So let's see if it is coming back and actually talking about that. Okay, so you can see there is a thumbs up and thumbs down. So this is the continuous feedback mechanism that we have, right? So I mean, if you like that response, they're learning that when I have somebody asking this question, then I can actually provide a real time feedback to the bot as well, that this is right or this is wrong, and that way they can actually improve their performance as they go on, right? What are some of the shortcomings of the bots? Lack of human touch. A lot of us, we are still very, very paranoid talking to a machine. Let's be very honest, right? I mean, the moment I see that I'm talking to voice agent, for example, I get a little bit anxious. Is it gonna understand what I'm talking about, right? And luckily, I mean, in most of the cases, that has been the case, and that is where the LLMs are coming in and making it better over a period of time as well, right? um, Language and context limitation, right? So even though they have been trained on a large amount of historical data, they may still not know everything about your company, about your product, about your services as much as a human do, right? Because they have been in that situation multiple times and they know exactly how to respond and all of that. So sometimes that may be a limitation. They may not be very good in terms of the vernacular languages or the regional languages of India and some other languages in other countries, right? Because most of the bots are predominantly trained on English, some of the Latin languages, right? Even Hindi for that matter, and some of the other more well-spoken languages in the world, like a Spanish language, maybe, and French and German and all of that. But is it something that I can have now bot talking to me in, let's say, some very, very peculiar language which is spoken in only a certain section of India? No, right? Even the chat agents will not be able to provide you that sort of flexibility, but bots may have further limitations. So for example, I can still have people who can speak Kannada, Tamil, Malayalam, Marathi, and I can have few number of folks who can actually have that conversation. But training a bot completely with a certain level of accuracy in Marathi, for example, may not be a possibility as of now, and they may have certain challenges, right? Just give me a second, guys. Just give me a second. Yeah, somebody's calling me repeatedly. Okay, so the call got disconnected. Fine. So, and then you have technical issues, downtime, some of those things that may also have the effect on the bot's performance, and they generally follow a script, right? So when you train a particular chatbot model, you are actually telling them a script that they should be following, and using that script, they are actually able to respond to you. And there might be instances when certain scripts may not necessarily work out for certain customer complaints, or what they really want you to address, right? So some of those things may be challenges, right? User acceptance and adoption. It has taken a huge lift since the chat GPT has come, right? Everybody is much more open and looking forward to in terms of interacting with the bots compared to what we had earlier on. So I think that's a big sort of boost which has come in because of the chat GPT. The acceptance and the adoption is going higher as we speak. uh, Best practices to follow again with the LLMs. You should do the ethical and responsible usage, right? I mean, it's very, very easy for somebody to start abusing the LLMs for wrong purposes, right? And create fake news, or create articles which are not true. I mean, there are many, many different things that people can do with this, right? I mean, create some new ways of committing the fraud and stuff like that, right? So I mean, everybody should be responsible in terms of what is right, what is not. And some of these LLMs have the natural biases, right? And I can demonstrate if time permits. So, for example, if you ask one of the models, Bert, right, or is it Bart, right? One of them, you ask the LLM, she worked as, and then you basically leave it open, so it will come out with waitress, nurse, all sort of occupations, right? And then you say he worked as, and it will come out with as an astronaut and all of those fancy job occupations, right? So there is a natural bias which has crept in. Why? Because that bias existed in our society, and that got translated into all the literature which is there on the net, and that's what the model has been trained on. So you have to be aware of those biases and make sure when you are deploying any of these bots, any of these LLM based bots, you're not necessarily propagating those biases, right? So you should have the checks and balances in place to really make sure that that doesn't get translated into anything that comes out from your bot, right? They need to be fine-tuned on the specific domain, right? So domain knowledge is very, very important for a bot. So if they haven't been exposed on, let's say, legal documents, and you ask a chat GPT to go and analyze the legal documents and present the or summarize the findings from ruling in a court, right? It may struggle. So you have to really make sure that if I have off-the-shelf bot, I'm training it on the specific data, the specific domain, and that's how basically they learn in terms of what needs to be said or done. Uh, you need to constantly be on top of the model performance and make sure that you're staying completely up to date. If the LLM performance is degrading in any of the metrics that we're looking at, then you take the necessary interventions, right? Data privacy and security. Anything that you tell to ChatGPT is being used for training the model further, right? So, what are the things that you want to share? What are the things that you want to share or say to any of these bots is something that you need to be aware of, right? uh, Transparencies and explainability of the bot's performance or the LLM's performance is something again that you need to keep an eye on in terms of making sure that it's not hallucinating and doing things which are not right for the LLM to do, right? And one of the key terms that people keep on using for the LLM's drawbacks is what we call as a hallucination, right? And I think that will be covered in the next slide. Is the it will make up certain information which you wouldn't even know whether it's true information or just made up information. So how do you really make sure that the information that comes out from any of these LLMs and passed on to the bots is accurate? Is something that we have to be always be on top of, right? We already spoke about the training data bias. We spoke about the gender bias. There might be racial biases. There might be biases towards a certain country. There might be biases towards a certain ethnicity, right? I mean, you name it, pretty much everything is going to be biased in terms of some of the data that comes in, right? So, uh, and all these developers have tried to take out some of those biases by being more proactive, but still some of that bias will continue, right? So you have to be really watching out for that. They know what they know because of the training data, so they have been over reliant on that, and that's where some of the other techniques which is not part of the scope over here, like a retrieval augmented generation, where you actually show them hundreds of documents where you want them to be trained on further, is helping them in terms of relying less on the training data and more on the data which is in the right context for the work that we're trying to do, right? But that we can cover in a different discussion. uh, Lack of real-time contextual understanding. So I think we spoke about that they have been trained, or ChatGPT 3.5 has been trained till September 2021. So anything which has happened after that, it doesn't have any recollection of that, right? So if you ask, who won the T20 the World Cup for cricket in, I think it was this year or last year, only, right? 2022, it wouldn't know, right? Because it's not really trained on that, but Google would know. And there are tools which can actually have, the LLM's performance tied to the Google performance, and then the final output comes out from the bot. So that we can discuss in a different meeting as well, right? Misinformation or the misleading outputs, again, something that you need to be very, very aware of. That do a fact checking, make sure that there's a human oversight or human in loop, because a lot of people get very, very nervous if you say, no, I'm completely running it on ChatGPT, whatever I'm telling, right? I mean, a lot of people will get really nervous very fast. So you must have a human in loop to really make sure that we have the some sort of oversight, checks and balances in place to ensure that the performance and output from the bots are monitored, right? Computational resources and processing time, huge one, right? So I spoke about the Falcon 40B, and let's say if you get very excited and say, you know what, Alfie told me that I should go with the Falcon 40B because it's the top performing open source model, and you want to try that, loading that in your Google Colab, it will never happen, right? Because 40 billion parameters, or each parameter will require, 8 bytes or 4 bytes of information. So you're looking at, gigabytes of information just to really store that model and all its parameter and the weights, right? So all your machines and everything, I mean, they don't have that sort of memory to hold it, right? So that's where you need to be, looking at the higher compute in terms of, some cloud provider or GPU providers where they can actually provide you that sort of computational resources, right? And I'm just talking about holding that model. I mean, I haven't spoken about anything in terms of the training the model, fine tuning the model, or having the model actually communicate, because then they will require certain other things like embeddings and all of those things, and they will be another 10 15 GB of resources that will be required in terms of the RAM and all of that. So it's not going to happen on your machine. So the demo that I'm going to do, even though if I wanted to do it on Falcon 40B, I will pull a lightweight LLM, but it works and behaves the same way as a big model like a Falcon 40B. Uh, some of the future work, both in terms of the chatbots and the LLMs, enhance natural language understanding, right? So basically understand the context more, understand the nuances, understand the intent of the users who are using it. All of those things will come in. Like, the human intelligence is gonna creep more and more in terms of the whole understanding of the natural language. Multimodal capabilities, right? So right now you can just have text input in the chat GPT and text output from the model, but you could upload an image, and there are already some models which are doing that, right? Paid ones and some unpaid ones as well, where you can upload an image and say, describe this, right? Or have an image and say, generate another image based on that, right? And you can think about all the possible inputs and outputs for the different types of the data that exists, and they will be able to handle that, right? Conversational context retention. You can see the context word keeps on coming again and again, because this is the one which basically makes or breaks your model. Where, I mean, they know exactly what has happened, and they are able to have the discussion, leveraging the prior knowledge, leveraging the entire portfolio that they are actually dealing with, and all of those things, right? And then they can actually pass on that context to the human as well. Integration with IoT and voice assistants, that's something that naturally is going to happen, because now you have bots who are actually doing this communication, LLMs which can handle, multiple languages, a huge amount of data and all of that. So now we are looking at how do we really integrate with respect to the other things around us. Like, for example, I can talk to Alexa or Siri and so on and so forth, and they can do certain things by exchanging the prompts with the LLMs which are sitting in the background, and you're able to do some of those things, right? So that's going to be a reality soon as well. Emotional intelligence and empathy, we have already spoken about that. Very, very important that we think through from that angle. Ethical and responsible AI. Again, more power means that you have to be more responsible, and the same goes with the LLM and the chatbots, because they can really say things and do things which are not ethically correct or legally correct as well in certain cases, right? Uh, it's never gonna be AI taking over. So sorry to burst that bubble or that balloon. People keep on saying that AI is gonna take over the humanity. Never gonna happen, right? I mean, you'll see more and more penetration of the AI, but it's never gonna be the case that the bots are telling us what to be done, right? Because they just won't have that level of emotional quotient that humans do, or the problem solving, or thinking out of the box as well, because they've been trained on a certain way, right? So that may not necessarily happen right away. And then we're looking at advancement in the model architectures. Definitely, I mean, I think the scene is exploding, right? I mean, the site I was looking at, I was telling you, like, in terms of all the models which exist, you'll see that the number of models that I saw some time back were around less than 200,000. Now, suddenly 50,000 more models have come in, right? And this will continue to happen, because I can even work on an LLM, make some tweaks, and I can push it to the Hugging Face library, right? But there are some genuine new models which keep on coming every day, pretty much, right? Or every week at a bare minimum. So with that, let me just go back to the slide. And I think we are done with the presentation. So I'm going to open up for the Q&A, and then we can move to the actual coding part. Any questions, thoughts?
If anyone having a question, they can raise a hand.
Yeah, you can unmute. You can come on the chat. Happy to take up any questions, comments from anyone.
Sai, you can unmute yourself and ask the question.
Yeah, thank you. So, yeah, thanks for giving the presentation. This is Sai.
Hi, Sai.
Yeah. So, a quick question. Whenever we are training this, like this LLM, what kind of hardware support is usually required? And also, because the hardware, the kind of VMs what we are trying to use, it needs a huge amount of computing power. And of course, it depends on the dataset size what we are trying to use it, right? So my question is the computing power varies from data set to data set depends on the train of LLM, because to train the LLM, the data set, in order to generate the huge volume of data set, some kind of random thing, shall we do it with any kind of cloud services, or they are offering to generate automatically to train the LLM model, or do we need to implement anything on our own to take a call on that? That is my question.
Yeah. No, I got your question. Thanks for the question, Sai. So the short answer is, I think it's not practical that it can be done on your local machine, right? I mean, even if you have a machine with the GPU, you will quickly run out of the power in that, right? So it's always a good practice to be on some sort of cloud to make it happen. And the other thing that goes in favor of having some cloud provider to handle the LLM workload is that it's scalable, right? So today you're training your model on, let's say, Falcon 13 billion parameters, right? So you say, okay, fine, 24 GB GPU is going to be good for me, right? But then, this performance is not something which I am really comfortable with. I need to really go and train a bigger model on. Then are you going to go and buy a new hardware? No, right? This is not really something that is scalable. So, but you can always go and say, hey, AWS, hey, GCP, I need a bigger instance. And within like, few hours, you'll get a bigger instance, right? The other thing is you're not looking at an upfront cost to invest, right? So, I mean, if you buy a decent machine to handle these LLMs, you're looking at maybe, 2 lakh rupees of investment, right? Versus if I want to use, if I want to start using AWS or GCP, I can get started for, few cents a day. I mean, depending on what I'm using and so on and so forth. So my advice is, I mean, think about the cloud, and some of these cloud providers provide you free GPU as well. So, for example, Google Colab gives you, I think, 8 GB GPU for some period of time. Yeah, but there is no commitment that it's going to be always available for you. But you can definitely leverage that to train it, right? There are other frameworks which are coming in, like a LoRa, QLoRa, to really take a bigger model and use a quantization strategy. Quantization is nothing but like a compression of the models and the weights without losing any information to a smaller the compute requirement, and then train that, and then again blow it up to a bigger model, right? So some of those techniques are there as well. But short answer is you probably require some sort of cloud provider if you are doing some serious work on the LLM.
Okay, but yeah, I got your point. And in order to train the LLM model, the data set what we are required, right? That kind of data set is generating randomly. Any kind of cloud service is helpful to generate the data set randomly, or do we need to build any algorithm to meet the requirement? Something using
It's
Python.
always good to have your own data. Bring your own industry specific, your company specific data to train it the model on. So it's always helpful. And going back to your previous question, there are APIs as well. I mean, Sai. So just don't think that you have to go and immediately subscribe to an AWS or GCP. There are APIs as well. So, for example, if you're using the Open AI in a program, right? I mean, they provide you API key. And using that, the model is hosted remotely. You're actually leveraging the model from their servers, right? So you're talking to the servers via the API. So that's another option that you can think about.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions, thoughts, folks, before I move to the demo? Feel free to jump in if you have any thoughts, questions, or I mean, you want to get more clarity on anything that I've covered. I went through the slides very fast because I wanted to give more time for the demo. But if there is any question, happy to take it up now. Okay, so I think maybe you can ask me later on. So I will be using HuggingFace, right? So for folks who don't know what is HuggingFace, it's an open source platform where people can host their models. They look into all the open source models, and they do leaderboard and stuff like that. Where I mean, they will tell you these are the best models for different things, and this probably requires several hours discussion for exploring all the different tabs over here. But I'm going to give you the crux of it. So let's say you're searching for the models that you want to build on. You can look into these tags which are there, right? So image to image, there is a model. Video classification, there is a model. Document question answering, there's a model, right? Text to image, text to video. So you can say text and it will generate a video for you. Image to text, it will describe what is there in the image. All of those things are there. But what we are really interested is in the question answering, right? This is what we call as a chat bot, right? So question answering, you can see these are the models which are there, right? So DeepSet, Roberta, some of these models are there. And any of these models, if you click on it, by the way, I mean, you can sort it as well. So right now they have default sorting is trending, which is trending higher, right? But I want to see, what are the most downloaded models? So you can see the most downloaded model is Roberta base Squad 2, right? Squad is the name of the data. Roberta is the framework, how this LLM is developed. And when I say LLM, generally, I mean, the technical term that we use for this, folks, is what we call as a transformer, right? So they are nothing but transformers, right? And that's a different discussion. And this is more like a deep learning 101. So LLMs are nothing but the transformers, different layers of that. So all of these are the transformers. So Roberta is a transformer, which is called a large language model because it's just, too much data that they have been trained on. So you can click on this, for example, and it will tell you, how many times it has been downloaded, and it will tell you how you can do some of the hyperparameters optimization over here, how you can use this model in terms of if you want to deploy this model in the chatbot and stuff like that, and variety of different things that you can try out over here, right? I mean, they have an interface where you can actually ask a question and they will tell you what the response is. But we're gonna look into something smaller, and they have Hugging Face has what we call as a pipeline, and I'll just take maybe few seconds to explain you the pipeline, right? So what is a pipeline and why this is important? So it basically hides a lot of complexity under this pipeline, right? So any type of chatbot, basically what happens in the entire processing of the things is following, right? So you have your text coming in. Text is basically your context, like your data. This context needs to be converted to the numbers because none of the machine learning, deep learning, LLMs, they understand the text, right? So even though they deal with the text, you're telling them something in the natural language and they're telling you something back in the natural language, but they do not understand the text. So these need to be converted to numbers, right? And the fancy name for this is what we call as the embeddings, right? And embeddings is nothing but, let's say, the word dog. When I do the embedding on that, maybe one model will create 1500 embeddings, right? So 1500 meaning this will be a list of numbers 0 0.1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and minus 0.456, and so on and so forth. 1500 numbers will be there. Now, this may sound crazy. Why would a word dog will have a 1500 numbers to represent it, right? Because the dog may have many characteristics to it, right? So it's a four-legged animal. It has hair. It is a pet. It's friendly with human, right? It's like sibling to fox. So there's like many different meanings that the word dog may have. So to represent this meaning, we have these embeddings, right? So the pipeline basically helps you in terms of taking any text, doing these embeddings, storing the embeddings in what we call as a vector database, vector DB, where the embeddings are stored, and then the embeddings will be pulled, and then it will be doing a lot of different things, what we call as a semantic similarity, right? These are getting a little bit technical, but I'll just talk about in terms of the overall flow to find the right documents and all of that, and then it will be converting these embeddings and the search results back to the text. So that's the purpose of the pipeline. So it hides a lot of complexity underneath. So do not think that LLM execution is as simple as what I'm going to show you, but pipeline using Hugging Face pipeline really makes it easy, right? So without any further ado, then let me just go back to my notebook, right? And I'll be happy to share this notebook with you later on. I think I got disconnected. Okay, yeah, I think I did, right? So the first thing we're going to do is open up Google Colab, because I'm using the pipeline. I'm using a hosted model from HuggingFace. I'm talking to them via the API. I don't need to necessarily have a GPU or TPU to run this, right? So I'm going to do first thing. I will install certain packages. So I will do pip install HuggingFace. This is the same library I showed you. And then I'm going to do pip install transformers. Transformers are nothing but the technical name of the LLMs. LLMs is more the common name for the large language models, but underneath they are nothing but transformers. And the third package that we are installing over here is for your chatbot visualization, which is called Gradio. All of these are free of cost, right? So you don't have to pay anything. So it will take some time for me to install them, but that's okay. And Transformers is a package which is basically part of HuggingFace, and I think Python has some other things as well besides HuggingFace, but it's definitely a requirement. So you can see now I've run the code, everything is installed. These are some of the other models that you can try out, but I will try a model called Roberta Base Squad 2, right? So if you remember when I was showing you this one, the open source models, I was sorry, I think I was in the main page. So if I go to the models and then do question answering and then sort them by the most downloaded one, so you can see the very first model which is coming in is Roberta Base Squad 2. And this is a light model. I have worked on this model, so that's why I know that. But before you deploy anything, you should just make sure you know what is the size of the model, whether my notebook can handle that or not, and then move forward. So I know for sure it will be handled very well in the Google Colab environment. So that is the model I'm going to use. Again, this is a large language model, but I'll explain you what we're doing. So from Transformer, we are importing Auto Tokenizer. Auto Tokenizer is nothing but creating the embeddings of the text, like the text to numbers creation, because numbers is what the LLMs really understand, right? We are importing the visualization library Gradio. From Transformers, we are importing the pipeline. Pipeline will make the magic happen for you. All you have to tell the Hugging Face library is what is the model that you want to use, right? So I'm saying deep set Roberta Base Squad 2. How do I know this is the name? Because when I went to the Hugging Face library, it says if you want to use this model, just copy from here. So if I copy from here and come back to my notebook, and I'll just put it as a comment, you will see this is exactly the same model that I have put over here, right? So this is the model that you have to grab. You can grab any other model, but you should grab the exact name from the Hugging Face library, otherwise it won't work, right? So I've specified what is the model name. Then I'm creating my tokenizer. Tokenizer is nothing but please convert that into the number so that my LLMs can really understand. So auto tokenizer from pre-trained model. This is nothing but a method of this package library, because it will say, okay, what is the model that you're using? Okay, you have told me that I'm using Roberta based Squad 2 model. So I will bring in the tokenizer schema for converting the text to numbers for that particular model, right? Because tokenizers and models, they go hand in hand. So if you're using a Falcon 40B model, you should use a Falcon 40B tokenizer. If you're using the Chat GPT 3.5 model, you should use the OpenAI embeddings as well, right? So just to really make sure that the models and the embeddings are in sync, we have to use the same embeddings, right? So this is what the pipeline really makes it happen for you, that I'm using the auto tokenizer from the pre-trained and I'm passing on this model. Okay, so let's do that. And it should take, yeah, okay, it's already run. Then this is where I'm defining my object, which is NLP. So I'm saying, okay, I want to do question answering. If you want to do the summarization, you can, instead of saying the question answering, you can say summarization. If you want to do the translation, you can, instead of saying the question answering, I want to do the translation, right? If you want to do any other things like, named entity recognition, there's a pipeline for that as well. So there are many, many pipelines that you can explore in the Hugging Face, but I'm doing question answering. Now comes the part we have spoken about, that the model will be as good as the context that you're providing. So I'm providing a very, very little context over here, just to really show you a baby example of how a bot really works, right? So I'm telling My name is RP and I love working on the LLMs and generative AI, right? And this is in triple quotes because it could be multiple lines, right? So for example, and I live in Bangalore, right? So let's say I just want to specify that as well. So this is people who have worked on Python, you will know that, I mean, triple quotes are nothing but a multiple line text string basically that it's gonna have that. So now I'm ready. So what have we done? So we have already imported our LLM. We have tokenized that LLM. Now we have defined the pipeline that I want the question answering to be done. I have specified my model. I have specified my tokenizer. I'm good to go. And the last thing, I have told my model, this is what you should be aware of in terms of telling the answers back to me, right? So I ran that, and then I asked, what is my name? Question is, what is my name? And I pass it on in the NLP pipeline. Question is question, context is context. And it came back and says, your name is RP. And by the way, where did I find this? I found this in the position 11 and it ended in position 13. So basically it's saying, if I count the number of characters, I found your name to be starting at 11th place and ending at 13th place. So that's fine, good. Then I ask, what do I love? Working on the LLMs and generative AI. So again, it's getting it from this working on the I love. And it's a really baby example, so it's not really a big deal, but this will make you think in terms of how the any LLMs really work, right? And it again tells what is the position where you can find this information, and this is the confidence score that it has, right? So, and then I actually pass on a bigger context, right? So I say, okay, fine. Since it's working on a baby example, I just grab this from somewhere and I'm passing on a much bigger context. You can imagine that I can pass on, things like, which are 1,000 lines or 5,000 lines. It doesn't really matter, right? But don't do it in the notebook because then you won't be able to see. You should upload a document and then do the document tokenization and all of that. But let's not go there. So I'm just uploading some random stuff I found from what is a rental agreement, right? I have a URL and then I have some blurbs in terms of what is a rental agreement. So then I ask, what is a rental agreement? It comes back, says leave and license agreement, which may not be accurate because it's just a very little context I have given. Then I ask, typically how long is a rental agreement? And it's there in that text. So it says 11 month. Let's say if this is correct or not, right? So somewhere over here 11 month will be mentioned. So I see 12 month. Okay, so are entered into the 11th month period, right? So it's able to have a good Q&A chatbot sort of level of things. Then I ask a very generic question: what is a legal document? And it will say something which I think I didn't like the answer: a rental agreement. So legal document is much bigger than a rental agreement, but because I have a limited context on which this bot is actually performing, I'm not surprised with the answer, right? So that's why the context is really important. You should tell it much more information, then only it will be accurate for you. Okay, so this is a quick walkthrough of a simple chatbot. Now I'm gonna go to the GUI, which is what we imported as the Gradio interface. If you remember, we imported this package called Gradio SGR, and that is what we will be using for building the GUI. It's really simple, straightforward, but just makes it look fancy. But underneath, it's the same thing, right? So I will switch gears and talk about that now. So it really requires a function, right? So any sort of GUI interface like a Streamlit, Gradio, even HuggingFace has something for doing some of the stuff. Like, I mean, they will require a function, right? So I define a function, I pass on the context, I pass on the question, and that basically this function is doing nothing but whatever I have shown you earlier on. So it's doing exactly the same thing. And then I initialize my app. So I create an app called app, and then I'm defining my interface, very simple interface. It's going to take the function as the function. It's going to have text box as inputs, and it's going to have text box as output. So you can have an image as the output as well. I am naming my bot as RP's bot, and I have a certain theme, and I have a certain description. So input, context, and question, and then get the answer in terms of any user who is coming to the platform. What are they supposed to do? Right? So I run it. It has run like a charm. And then I will simply go and say app.launch, right? And there are certain parameters that you want to people to really use it and all of that. I can share that URL with you and you can use it offline. And if I click on it, it has generated a URL for me. And if I click on this URL, it will open up a bot looking like interface, right? So it's going to take a minute. There you go. So, right, the bot is up and running. So it is doing exactly what we told it. So input context in question and then get the answer. So where is it coming from? We had this typed over here, right? So input context and question, then get your answers. RP's bot is something that I've typed over here, right? And a bunch of other things that we've already spoken about, like, 2 inputs and 1 output. 2 inputs and 1 output is what is expecting. 2 inputs and 1 output. What are the 2 inputs? It says, please give me the context and then ask me the question, and then I will tell you the answer. Okay, fine. And this is something I just bumped into. I didn't have the time, so there's a lot of politics and news going on this topic. So I wanted to understand who is really Sharad Pawar, right? So let's say I was living in the situation where I was not even aware of, who is this person. So I wanted to have a simple bot which can answer some of these questions. So I put this as a question. This as a context, and then I can ask who is Sharad Pawar, and the answer will come over here. An Indian politician, right? What award he was given. So now it will understand he, meaning that you're talking about that person only. Padma Vibhushan, right? So you can see over here. So he was given a Padma Vibhushan, which is the second highest civilian honor of the India. And then I can ask, when was this award given? 2017, right? Okay, fine. Let's ask some other question, which is there in the context. Remember, I mean, you have to be, within the context. If this is not in the context, then it won't be able to answer that. And that's where the context is really important, as we spoke about earlier. What is his daughter's name? So you can think about like a reading comprehension. You can pass on any reading comprehension and it will be able to answer that question. Supriya Sule is the correct answer, right? And finally, last question. What party he created and when? Nationalist Congress Party. So it's not able to answer the when question. And when did he create that party? Maybe I have to specify as a separate question. Let's try one more time. Okay, so now it's able to get the enough context, which he founded in 1999. So now you can see there are 3 things which are very important, 2 things which are very important: context and then prompt, right? So in the language of the LLM, this is the context, this is the prompt. If you don't give the right prompt, you will not get the right answer, right? So don't be surprised if you're not getting the right answer because your prompt is not complete or prompt is confusing and all of that. So that's what basically all the people who are working in the generative AI are doing. Can I really provide the right context? And there are of course tons of complications which I'm not going to go through right now. It's not as simple as just give all the documents, because then the model cannot really handle it, right? They have a certain limitation in terms of the amount of information they can chew on. So there are the strategies where, I mean, you have to pass on the relevant context using some frameworks like the RAG that I was spoken about. And then you have to get the right prompt also. So it may have the right context, but if you ask the wrong questions in the wrong way, then you got the wrong answer. No surprises there, right? And this link is shareable. So, I mean, I'll share with you. So this is the beauty. So all of you can create your own bots and share with your friends and families today and impress them with a simple working bot that you can ask it anything, and they will be able to respond back to you, right? So you can actually go ahead and try out this link. I hope it's working for all of you. And that was all we had for the discussion today. I'll take a pause and then give the floor back to you to ask me any questions, thoughts. And I hope this link is working for you. You can try it out. Put something else. I mean, you can grab any article from the net, put it there, start asking the question, and it will be hopefully working for you. I think this remains live as long as my code is live. The moment I shut down my code, then it won't be working. Yeah, Ishank, you can unmute and come. Ishank? Okay, I cannot hear you. If you're
Isank,
talking. Yeah. I
you
can hear
can
you
now.
now.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
So
Hi, Ishank.
I was trying something like this,
Hmm.
and I was basically trying to build a chatbot types on my Google Analytics data.
Hmm.
So I was exploring Llama. So that was a pretty extensive model.
Hmm. Yeah, Llama is a big one. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was not able to understand also,
Hmm.
but through this, can I do that? Like, I want to build like something give that my data set, like
Yeah.
website post-click data,
Hmm.
and it is able to give me like if I ask question like what were the session yesterday, so
Hmm.
it is able to give me that.
Yeah, so you will not be able to directly plug and play what we've spoken about, Ishank, today, because the context that I'm passing on is fairly limited, right? But when you're
Okay.
building a production ready bot, they will be shown, hundreds of pages of documents, or thousands of pages of document, hundreds of documents together, right? They cannot chew on all of these documents simultaneously. So the context is what we need to really shrink it for them. So let's say, for example, I've given them 1,000 documents, right? We have to follow approach to say from these 1,000 documents, let's break it down to the smaller chunks. And from those chunks, only pass on the relevant chunks which are similar to the query that the user is having, right? So there's a lot of details I can discuss with you offline, but this will not directly work.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Then I will connect with you later, sir, on that.
Yeah, please.
But a robot, but I can use Roberta on that also, right?
Yeah, 100% you can use Roberta. You can try with the BERT, Roberta, any of these models. You don't have to necessarily go with the Llama.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, up until now, we were using BERT only. I mean, even in our big tech companies also, we're using BERT only. So there's nothing wrong with the BERT just because the chat GPT has come.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Any other questions, thoughts, folks?
Satish, you can ask question.
Hi, Ratnakar sir. I would like to thank you and appreciate your time for taking time for providing this intro on the LLMs.
Sure.
Thank you very much for that. And one question I have is that the example you have shown is that like we are giving some context, like some data, and it is trying to, and we are trying to we are asking questions and trying to get answers for that. But
Correct.
let us say I would like to do so, like I live in Hyderabad, and let us say I would like to have one thing like some chat GPT kind of thing, which tells me Hyderabad history. I can ask any question on that Hyderabad history and it will tell me, right? And but without pre-trained, like without giving that context. How do I do that? Is that a different process or something different?
Yeah, so I mean, it's always helpful to give some context, right? So even though like ChatGPT 3.5, for example, like the ChatGPT which is available to all of us, it will know a lot about Hyderabad, right? But there might be certain documents which are there in the government space and stuff like that. And if you want to really build a very, very solid, chatbot, then you must expose your bot to those documents as well, right? Or those sites and stuff like that, right? And there are many loaders and wrappers. I mean, I can tell you one wrapper. You can research more on that. I mean, people who want to really implement some of this, called LangChain. This is what I'm using as of now. This is a wrapper on OpenAI, on other open source LLMs, which makes some of these tasks easy for you. So, for example, if you say, what if I have a PDF document? How can I load that? So there is a loader for PDF. What if I have, Microsoft Outlook storage or storage files, right? How can I do that? I mean, it can read that. What if I have, something in terms of HTML or JSON? It can read that, right? So, I mean, you can actually just point it to those documents and follow the standard flow, which is your text, smaller chunks, finding the relevant chunks, passing it out to the LLM, and then LLM can do the Q&A on those relevant chunks.
Okay. So, just to reiterate what you said, we have to, rather than providing the context in the information in this, we have to first load and spin up that
Documents. Yeah.
document. Okay. Load
Yeah.
all the relevant documents
Yeah.
and then spin
Correct.
up. Okay.
Correct. Yeah. Because this example that I showed you, I mean, how much I can load over here, right? I mean, very limited amount of text I can load over here, right? Which is
Correct.
not going to be really handy. And
Right.
the other thing is, I cannot load too much text directly into the OpenAI or any of these packages because they have a limitation on number of tokens they can process, right? So I think OpenAI can process only 4079 or 4097 tokens, right? So for example, if anything is more than that characters, it will say, no, I cannot handle it, right? So then you have to really figure out which 4079 tokens I have to pass on. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Thank you very much, sir.
Sure. Other questions, thoughts, people?
Gaurav, you can ask your question.
Hello, sir.
Hi, Gaurav.
Yeah, actually, my question was about the token limitation.
Yeah.
How can we deal with the token limitation? As I have seen in the this ChatGPT and all, 4096 is the only limitation.
Correct. Yeah.
And sometimes we have the PDF, the context more than that. Even it is not possible in my case to count the tokens from the string value.
Yeah. So there you have to look into what we call as a chunking strategy, Gaurav. You can research more on it, right? So we have to create the chunks, right? And I can just tell you what is a chunk very, very briefly over here. I'll just look for a blank spot somewhere here. Otherwise, I can fire up another PPT to write. Yeah, so I think this is fine. So I can tell you, so let's say your document is 10,000 tokens, right? I mean, most likely your document will be even more than that. So what really happens during the chunking strategy, and there are many ways of chunking that, is we can create things like this, right? So let's say this is a chunk of 500 words or tokens, and this is 100. And there's an overlap between the previous chunk and the next chunk, right? So that they should have the continuity of what we've discussed in this chunk, right? So basically, chunk 1, chunk 2, chunk 3, chunk 4, like this, you may have 500 chunks, right? Or I mean 200 chunks in this case if I have chunks of 500 word each. So now what we do is once the user query comes in, we do something called as a semantic similarity, right? So let's say I have the entire Indonesia tourism document, right? But the user is asking, what are the good places to see in Bali, right? So from these 200 chunks, I can say Bali happens only in these 4 chunks. And let's grab those 4 chunks and pass it on to the LLM. And the LLM will be able to answer that. Next question comes in, okay, what about Jakarta, right? Again, it will go into these 200 chunks, do a semantic similarity. Which are the chunks where Jakarta is found? It will grab those and then it will handle that, right? In certain cases, you may have more chunks than what it can handle, right? So it will then throw an error. So there, I mean, you have to then say, okay, only pass on the 5 relevant chunks. K is equal to 5, right? So there are mechanism to control that as well.
Is this something related to LangChain and Llama index, or else this is different?
This is a general strategy. I mean, you can do it in the LangChain, you can do it on the Llama model, but it's a general strategy that we follow.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Anyone else? Okay, so if nothing else, then I will turn it over to the folks to take it forward from here.
I think it's the number of messages we received that it was an excellent session. I think there is no doubt about it. Very useful. So we got your link as well. Everyone hoping that everyone will start practicing on the script. Script also will be shared with you. through a mail, those who have attended. Please look forward to our mails, right? A quick introduction about us, because we thought that those who are not familiar with RACE and REVA University, please ensure that you go through our websites, and we have a set of very research-driven, practical master's programs in AI, where these concepts and more has been put into practice. And a lot of our participants who are working professionals have seen that their careers, their perspectives change. So do look at our programs, especially one in analytics as well as another one in AI program, and connect with us to know more. We would be happy to host you in our campus, which is towards North Bangalore. So with that, let us close the session with a great thank you to Ratnakar for making again. I think you have, the topic has been not easy too. So I was wondering that how will you quickly do an LLM modeling and build a chatbot? I think you did it in less than 15 minutes. I think a big thank you and clap for an excellent session, and keep inspiring us. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And thanks for joining. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.